Dr. Dana Tassone with participants in HFT 6228, a graduate course in Human Resource Management for a degree in Hospitality and Tourism Management. We're talking about today Chapter 12, which deals with Performance Management Systems, PMS, not to be confused with Property Management Systems in the lodging industry. Performance Management Systems. This chapter brings together everything we've talked about. It's the last linear segment in all that we have discussed. From this point on, we only focus on, not only, but importantly, focus on items to add to your management toolbox concerning influence skills. Remember, 4 functions of management: planning, organizing, influence, and control. And this chapter brings us to the end of that cycle and culminates in the function of control. We've talked about planning, we've talked about organizing, we've talked about influence, and this brings us to control, which is, what is control? It's nothing more than comparing actual performance to standards or benchmarks for performance. And from this point on, we go into the details, I guess, of certain influence skills, which any HR practitioner, interestingly enough, has to know all this stuff we're talking about. Legal, statistical, financial, operational. But the factor that really makes them managers is that they become experts in influence skills. And that's how we cap off the course. Now, you've noticed that we have used 2 terms interchangeably ad nauseum. Those being strategic and systems. Strategic and systems. And the important, that's not important, well, it is important. The important thing for all managers to know is what makes for a strategic thinker and what makes for a systems thinker. 2 different things. A strategic thinker begins with the end in mind. We call that a goal or an objective. Begins with the end in mind and thinks in linear steps in a process that will ultimately achieve the goals. So the strategic thinker behaves today to provide a prelude for tomorrow, which provides a prelude for maybe tomorrow and the day after, and so on, until the linear process for each objective is achieved. That's a strategic thinker. They're chess players. They're always thinking 2 or 3 moves ahead. A systems thinker is not a linear thinker, or doesn't practice a linear thinking, let's say. A systems thinker thinks non-linearly in terms of holism. A systems thinker can see the patterns of relationships among various components in an internal and in an external scenario. So the systems thinker identifies patterns of relationships, while the strategic thinker identifies processes leading to an outcome. So which should I be? Should I be a systems thinker, or should I be a strategic thinker and as you already know. The answer is both. We need to think linear in linear terms, but guided toward a goal or an outcome. And we need to identify the patterns of relationships that exist within organizations and the forces that surround those organizations. As the human condition and our training in our progress of learning encourages us to put things into topics, let's say, into mutually exclusive boxes, and they aren't even connected in a linear fashion. You got a box here, and 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 you have comprehended that box, and then this box, and then that box, and then this box, and none of them have anything to do with each other. That's the way we're trained. And of course, that's not true. It's a myth. It's a myth that we're brought up with. The knowledge boxes follow a pattern of linearity, and that pattern, anything linear, as you already know, is mechanistic in terms of science. Recall when we talk about the evolution of management, and we started with scientific management, and then we got to management science, two different things. And the contribution of management science is really the creator of what we call today strategy. And you remember it had to do with solving complex issues. And the beauty of it is that it applied the scientific method to management, which is really what you're learning here, is the scientific method. And so the linear strategic system resides within a circle, and the circle is the system, and the systems thinker thinks abstractly to identify how this and this and this and this relate to that linear path, all those relationships. And we talked about interdependent relationships, not dependent, not independent, interdependent. And you've been given numerous scenarios that showed how the ripple effect of one action generates another, like a pond generates another. So the coexistence of these two things, I've always found to be fascinating, because some people are wonderful linear thinkers, but don't have a clue about nonlinear abstractions. And then other people, and you've met these people, are so abstract that you can't keep them on a linear path. I've worked with some of these people. And so, as far as right or wrong, there is no right or wrong. They both exist. That's the beauty of quantum mechanics. The experiments, quantum mechanics deals with subatomic particles, right? This isn't science. But everything, every discipline applies to management, and you know that. And so in quantum mechanics, the argument for years was about light, the light, that thing that travels 186,000 miles per second, and the argument was that light is comprised of particles, and the other argument was no, light consists of waves. So it's particles or it's waves, and thanks to the Heisenberg and Maxwell Planck experiments, the answer turned out to be they're both. They are both. Light is both particles and waves, which is like is a major quantum breakthrough. And this is probably, or at least in my mind, this is probably the factor that explains mechanistic and organic existence when you think about it. We already established that. What is an organization? An organization is a collection of people brought together for a common purpose. It's one of those. And what makes it organic? Because it has people in it, and I think people are organic structures. So the organization is organic, but it requires linear processes to achieve its goals, which ultimately feed its mission. And as you know, the mission is the reason for its existence. It's its purpose. It's its values. It's why it exists. And so both systems thinking and strategic thinking are required for a healthy organization. So, and I'm getting off here. So bring it down. Let's bring it down to this culminating chapter called Performance Management Systems. Well, where does it come from? It comes from everything we've talked about so far. It's not, I like it when people say, oh, can I want to write a paper. Can I just make this up? No, you can't. You have to have some foundation. You have to find a reason to say whatever you're going to say. Here's an interesting example of individuals behaving in nonlinear fashion and non-systemic fashion. College students. What do college students do? They take a string of courses. Whatever their rationale is, they take these courses, and as we've been trained to do, they believe each one is mutually exclusive. And then in some programs, they do this only to find that at the end, some prof asks them to put them together, put the puzzle together, demonstrate your proficiency in developing a linear process of your coursework, why you took it. And also, some professors would ask you to contemplate, to engage in contemplative practices to see the gestalt, or the whole. And what's the reason for that? Because you've identified the process, and who are you today that you weren't yesterday, or last year, or 2 years ago, or 5 years ago. That's the gestalt. And so when that happens, you're being asked to think strategically and demonstrate that you can do that, and then demonstrate that you can think about it from a systems perspective. See the pattern of relationships. So property management systems, what makes them happen? Well, it starts, and there's a good figure 11.1 in the text, and it now for the first time, I've given you everything in linear fashion, either vertically or horizontally. Why? Because that's how we've been trained to think. And this provides it in a circular fashion, which is the same as the linear, except it shows the cycle. And so when we talk about property management systems, they include strategic planning that we've talked about. They include legal compliance. They include ethical decision making. They include recruitment and selection. They include training, retention, and then they culminate in control. And the control mechanism here, obviously, is the performance appraisal. And that's obviously the crux of the chapter. So So again, not to your graduate students, I'm not going to walk you through this chapter, but that picture on that page gives you the gestalt, if you will, gives you the system. That's why we've been talking about what we talk about. And so you have strategy to recruit a pool of qualified applicants. You have a strategy to select from that pool the most qualified given your specifications. And you then onboard those individuals. You train them to give them skills and knowledge. And then you practice solid employee relations policies to keep them satisfied, content, feeling that they are significant, feeling that they are human beings worthy of respect and dignity, giving them a sense of continuity, and all of those things, making them happy within your environment and comfortable. And then you have to have a means of evaluating these individuals' performance, not the individuals, but their performance. Why? Well, because it tells you where you are on the path to your goals. I gave you all kinds of methods that are used for this. You probably, most people I know, probably, when it comes to performance appraisals, probably have experienced the usual category rating system, 5-point rating system. All the systems I designed never included. All the systems I designed were ranked on behavioral anchored rating scales, but not consistently with the Dictionary of Occupational Titles. And it was hybrid with weighted performance measures based on objective behaviors, and the outcomes were meets what? Standards, does not meet, and exceeds the standards. That's a very solid way to provide an indication to individuals about their performance. So, I worked for a guy once, and at the time I was a troubleshooter, so I would go to an operation, fix it, and then we'd find another operation, fix it. So my job was project oriented, and so I would sit in his office and he would brief me, about the project, and then I would tell him about the steps that I was going to take to perform the diagnosis and intervention for the operation. And I would leave his office. And as soon as I left, he would write down everything that I told him, word for word. And then, because it was project-based, we would meet frequently, along my critical path method. Remember that? Critical path method that I had laid out for him and myself. But right before I walk into his when I walked into his office, he would say to me, and he would get into a very formal mood and say, Mr. Sullivan, we had a meeting 3 weeks ago. It was on a Friday. It was raining. And you told me, and I quote, he's not reading anything, he's just telling me this. And I'm thinking, man, this guy's got a photographic memory. Unbelievable. And what I later learned is that he was just using probably one of the more powerful tools a manager can use, and it's called the critical incident method. Very simple, informal appraisal. You do it on a daily basis. It takes 5 minutes a day. You walk around. Everybody should be doing MBWA, management by walking around. You walk around. You observe actions, which are incidents, and you look for important critical actions, and you jot them down. And you keep a file. And you put your little slips of paper or your, whatever you're typing or whatever, you put them in this little file for each person. And at the end of the year, you have an entire year's worth of critical incidents that you can cite specifically for that individual. In my offices, when I went into HR, in my offices, we practice MBO. I derived our objectives from the corporate objectives, and I established functional objectives for each sub-function within our area, and then our guys would each establish their objectives to feed those objectives, and we would keep a board. Visuals are very important for communication, I think, with people. So we keep a board, and the board consisted of each person's name, and we have cards of their critical path for the achievement of the objectives. And they were written on cards that could slide. And so if somebody wasn't making the intended due date, you just slide the card forward. If somebody exceeded the due date, the card would go down. The card would always go down once the project was completed, once the goal was accomplished for each of the functions within the HR office. And they were color coded. So, once the card went down, it was color coded. Orange, I think, was they made the due date. Yellow was they exceeded it or something like that. And they were index cards, just little index cards. And they would go into the drawer, my drawer. And I had a stack for each of them. And then when it comes time for their performance appraisal, we just played cards, And it always turned out their not so good stack was like this, and their good stack was like this. They could actually see the stack. And I talked to them and flip them the card, and they throw it in a bin. I had set up a little bin. Yeah, that's a powerful reminder of behavior. And as I said, I was thinking about something else. Oh well, lost that thought. But anyway, and I'm probably running out of time anyway. Something good. Oh, so a performance management system is holistic. It covers everything that you have done from the initial planning phase through all the sub functions, and it is cyclical. It shows patterns of relationships. Therefore, it's a system. It's the beauty of IT and IS. It's a system, and it comes from a linear process called a strategic plan that kind of sits on top of it, and that culminates everything that we've been doing for the past 11 weeks. That's it. That's the nutshell that the HR function falls into, and then from now on, of course, then we're going to have to talk about. We don't have to, but we will talk about influence factors of management. And we're out of time, so I'll see you in the next clip.